It was a crisp autumn night in the quiet suburb of Millfield. The leaves rustled in the gentle breeze, and the moon cast a silvery glow over the neat rows of houses. Inside one of these houses, a young nanny named Sarah settled onto the couch, flipping through channels on the television. The Johnsons had gone out for their anniversary dinner, leaving her in charge of their two children, Emma and Tommy. Sarah had been babysitting for the Johnsons for a few months now, and she had grown fond of the children. Emma, a curious 6-year-old, and Tommy, a playful 4-year-old, were both sound asleep upstairs. The house was silent except for the low hum of the TV. It was shaping up to be an uneventful evening, just as Sarah had hoped. Around 10 p.m., the phone rang, breaking the tranquility of the night. Sarah reached for the cordless phone on the coffee table and answered. "Hello?" For a moment, there was only silence on the other end. Then, a man's voice, low and raspy, broke the quiet. "Have you checked on the children?" Sarah frowned, glancing up the stairs. "Who is this?" The line went dead. Shaking her head, Sarah hung up. She dismissed it as a prank call, likely some teenager trying to scare her. She returned to the TV, but the uneasy feeling lingered. As the minutes ticked by, the phone rang again. "Hello? Have you checked on the children?" The same voice, the same question. Sarah's heart began to race. She hung up quickly, her hands trembling. She stood up and walked to the bottom of the stairs, straining to hear any sound from the children's rooms. There was nothing but silence. She decided to check on them, just to be sure. Sarah tiptoed up the stairs, the old wooden steps creaking under her weight. She pushed open Emma's door and peeked inside. Emma was fast asleep, her chest rising and falling steadily. Relieved, Sarah closed the door softly and moved to Tommy's room. He was snuggled under his blanket, his favorite stuffed animal clutched in his arms. Satisfied that the children were safe, Sarah returned downstairs. She tried to shake off the eerie feeling the calls had left behind, but it clung to her like a shadow. She decided to call the police, just to report the strange calls. Better safe than sorry, she thought. "Millfield Police Department, how can I help you?" A calm voice answered. "Hi, this is Sarah. I'm babysitting for the Johnsons, and I've been getting these weird calls asking if I've checked on the children. It's probably just a prank, but it's really freaking me out." "All right, Sarah, stay calm. Do you have caller ID?" "No, it's an old phone. There's no display." "Okay, if he calls again, try to keep him on the line as long as possible. We'll trace the call." Sarah agreed and hung up, feeling a bit more secure knowing that the police were involved. She resumed her place on the couch, the TV now just background noise as she waited. It wasn't long before the phone rang again. Sarah's heart leapt into her throat as she picked it up, trying to steady her voice. "Hello? Have you checked on the children?" Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. "Who are you? What do you want?" There was a pause, then the voice replied, "Check the children." The line went dead again. Sarah's mind raced. She knew she had to keep him talking next time. The police needed time to trace the call. She put the phone down and stood by the window, staring out into the dark street. The minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an hour. Finally, the phone rang once more. Sarah took a deep breath and answered. "Hello? Have you checked on the children?" She forced herself to remain calm. "Yes, I have. They're fine. Why do you keep calling? Are you sure they're safe?" "Yes. Who are you?" The voice chuckled, a low, menacing sound that sent chills down her spine. "You should check again." Sarah was about to respond when the other line beeped. It was the police. She switched over quickly. "Sarah, you need to get out of the house. The call is coming from inside." Panic surged through Sarah. She dropped the phone and bolted for the door. As she fumbled with the lock, she heard footsteps upstairs. Someone was in the house with her. She threw open the door and ran outside just as a police car screeched to a halt in front of the house. 2 officers jumped out and rushed inside. Sarah stood on the lawn, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her eyes fixed on the front door. Moments later, one of the officers emerged, holding a disheveled man in handcuffs. His face was pale, his eyes wild. "We found him hiding in the attic," the officer explained. "Are the children all right?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, they're fine, thank you." The officers escorted the intruder to the police car, and Sarah watched as they drove away. She felt a wave of relief wash over her, but the terror of the night lingered. She would never forget the sound of that voice or the realization that he had been so close. The Johnsons returned home to find their house surrounded by police. They were horrified to learn what had happened but grateful that their children were safe. Sarah explained everything to them, and they hugged her tightly, thanking her for her bravery. The intruder, it turned out, was a former resident of the house. He had been obsessed with the Johnsons, watching them for weeks and waiting for an opportunity to strike. He had managed to sneak into the house earlier in the evening, hiding in the attic and using an old extension line to make the calls. Sarah's story quickly spread through the town. She was hailed as a hero, but the experience left her shaken. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the memory of that voice echoing in her mind. She decided to take a break from babysitting, focusing on her studies and trying to regain a sense of normalcy. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal. Sarah moved on from the traumatic night, but it was never far from her thoughts. She took up self-defense classes and became more cautious, always aware of her surroundings. She knew she could never let her guard down again. One evening, as she walked home from a late class, she noticed a man following her. Her heart raced, and she quickened her pace. She ducked into a nearby coffee shop, her eyes scanning the street. The man was gone. She took a deep breath and called a friend to walk her home. When she finally reached her apartment, she locked the door and checked all the windows. She sat on her bed, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't live in fear forever, but the shadows of that night still haunted her. One day, Sarah received a call from Mrs. Johnson. They were moving to a new house and wanted to have one last dinner with her as a thank you for all she had done. Sarah agreed, feeling a mix of emotions. She had grown close to the family, but the thought of returning to that house filled her with dread. The night of the dinner, she arrived at the Johnsons' house to find it filled with warmth and laughter. They shared stories and memories, the children running around happily. For a moment, Sarah felt a sense of peace. Maybe it was time to let go of the past. As the evening wound down, Mrs. Johnson took her aside. "Sarah, we found something in the attic when we were packing. I think you should see it." Curious, Sarah followed her upstairs. In the attic, Mrs. Johnson handed her a small, dusty box. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a journal. It belonged to the intruder. Sarah hesitated before opening the journal. The first few pages were filled with mundane details about the house, but as she read on, the entries became darker. The man had been living in the house for years, his obsession with the Johnsons growing with each passing day. He had watched them, learned their routines, and planned his move carefully. The last entry sent chills down her spine. It was written on the night of the calls, describing how he had hidden in the attic, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He had been inches away from the children, ready to cause harm. Sarah closed the journal, her hands shaking. She realized how close they had all come to disaster. She felt a mixture of anger and sadness for the man who had lost his sanity and for the Johnsons, who had been unaware of the danger lurking above them. The Johnsons moved to their new home, and Sarah continued with her life, but the experience had changed her. She became more involved in her community, advocating for safety and awareness. She shared her story, hoping to help others avoid similar situations. She still had nightmares, but she learned to face them, turning her fear into strength. She knew she couldn't change the past, but she could shape her future. She embraced her new role, finding purpose in helping others and making a difference. Years later, as she stood in front of a group of young women, teaching them self-defense, she felt a sense of fulfillment. She had turned her darkest night into a source of light for others. And though the call had come from inside the house, she had found the strength to overcome it. Sarah's story became a local legend, a cautionary tale told to babysitters and parents alike. The Johnsons never forgot her bravery, and the community rallied around her, supporting her efforts to promote safety and awareness. She continued to speak at schools and community centers, sharing her experience and teaching others how to protect themselves. Her efforts paid off, and the town of Millfield became a safer place. As the years passed, Sarah found peace. She met someone special, started a family, and built a life filled with love and laughter. She never forgot the night the call came from inside the house, but she had learned to live with the memories. One evening, as she tucked her own children into bed, she felt a sense of closure. She had faced her fears, turned her trauma into strength, and found happiness. She kissed her children goodnight and went downstairs, knowing they were safe. And as she sat on the couch, watching the news, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had survived, and she had thrived. She had turned a moment of terror into a lifetime of purpose. And she knew that no matter what challenges came her way, she had the strength to overcome them. The call had come from inside the house, but it had also sparked a journey of resilience and empowerment. And for that, Sarah was grateful.